Go live. Okay.
Yeah.
It says you're live. So
Woohoo!
let's hope we are this week. Karen is in the house.
Yay, Rachel, did we make it live? We are live. We are not recorded. We are live.
We are live. We are
So
live.
nice to be
We're
here.
so down with the kids now, Karen. Do you realize we're YouTubers?
We are YouTubers, no more Instagram lives. Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, this is
We're
it. Oh, and
right.
I've just seen on my phone we are live. Look, it's happening.
Oh, yay.
Now,
Hi,
what that
everyone.
means, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live and we're here to take your comments and questions. So this is our live at 5 chat. This is where we hang out. Karen and I were just talking about our previous chats. First one was Pat Sloan, amazing. And the second one was Kim, crazy. So Karen, what are you going to be? Amazing, crazy, normal?
I'm going to be all of the above. I'm going to try not to be too awful crazy. I can't compete with some other crazies that we know, but I have so much information and so much love for quilting that I'm just here to share all I can with everyone. And I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much, Rachel and Aurifil, for having me here. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's so nice when I was going to say with that word sharing, because this is why we do these chats, at the 5 o'clock live, is to really share in the community and to try and get some information out there and to make it fun, and just let people know about things they may never have known about. People might not know you. Certainly a lot of people won't know who we are. And so it's just great that people come across us and go, who's Crafty Monkeys? Who's Karen? And then we just chat. So it is lovely to have you. And it's great when guests like yourselves, because we're little baby YouTubers at the moment. We're little tiny baby YouTubers, but it's great when people like you who've been in the industry for so long say, yes, I would love to chat with you. So let's chat. Let's begin by talking. Karen, who are you? Where are you? I know that you're clearly American in America. So let's have a little chat about you, Karen. What's your history? Who are you?
I'm American. Yes, I'm Karen Miller, and my company is Redbird Quilt Co. I'm online on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, but I am a quilter, and I'm actually an educator. That's really my main thing. I've been quilting now, Rachel, for about 15 years now is all. My sister got me started with some little piecing, and I did some piecing with some thangles. They're the little papers, the half square triangle papers. I don't know if you've heard of them, but she got me started about 15 years ago with that, and I pieced my first quilt, and then I realized I really don't like piecing at all because I'm a programmer. I was a programmer, a business analyst by trade, and I did detail all day long, every day, and you had to be really specific about everything you were doing. So I felt that the piecing was a little bit much for me. So what I did was I learned to free motion quilt, and I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with wool applique because it's so fast and so fun. And then I fell in love with quilting my own little wool applique projects. And one thing led to another. I wrote a tutorial for Moda, the fabric company. I wrote a tutorial for them, and that tutorial was published, and then I did another one, and all of a sudden I started getting inquiries from guilds and shops to come and teach the things that I was writing about, which I had no intention of ever doing anything like that. It was so organically, it just kind of just grew from the grass up without any goals of my doing that. But you know what? It's been a blessing in my life. I love to watch the light bulb come on for folks when I say something or I do something or I demo something and they go, oh, that's what I was doing wrong, or oh, I would have never thought to do it that way. So I kind of snowballed this whole educational thing that I was doing using Aurifil thread now for about 10 or 12 years. And I just got so close with the folks at Aurifil. I fell in love with all their threads. I have to use them all the weights. So I kind of snowballed into becoming a master educator for Aurifil thread. And now I also head up on the side in my spare time when I'm not teaching their Aurifilosophy program, which is an education program. Is there a few things here that you see in common? So you can tell that you're going to have to just cut me off when I talk too much because I love to talk. So
no, it's fine. I don't mind. Because my husband enjoys it when I'm quiet for these times, because he's like in the end studio and he's like, Rachel's not talking. This is amazing. Because I'm always, I love it when people talk.
There must be
we'll talk about Aurifil, of course, in a little while. And actually, we do have a question for our lovely viewers today, or anybody who watches this video on repeat and wants to put a comment in the comment box. We would like to know if people would be interested in having an Aurifil full presentation, which we'll talk about a little bit later on and what that is. But it would be really interesting to know if people would actually be interested in having that with you. And you are an Aurifilosopher.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But let me just go back to the free motion, because when if people don't know my history, obviously I run Crafty Monkeys. We offer live crafting workshops, quilting workshops. I am not Yes, via Zoom, exactly. And I'm not a quilter. I worked on a craft TV channel, so I worked with amazing people for years, and then decided to start this company. And then all these people come and learn with us, and it's incredible. And like you say, the wonderful joy is seeing that light bulb moment. It's seeing people being creative. It's seeing people achieve something, and they're so proud of what they've done, and that is fantastic. And every designer I work with says the same thing.
Yes.
But that's what we do. I'm not a quilter, and I've always been around, the creative industries. My husband's a graphic designer, who's responsible for everything on the website. My dad was hugely into photography and making models, and my mom used to sew for Burberry and things like that. So I've been around it for years. But the one thing I did not know when we first started was that quilt designers would get people to finish their quilts. And when I heard this once, I was a bit like, bit lazy, can't you sew around the edges yourself? And I didn't realize that was the free motion thing that went over the designs. Now, I did a great trunk show with Nicholas Ball and Trudy Wood, and they work together like that. And so
they're amazing. I love both of them. Yeah, great folks.
So I want to talk to you about that for you, because I know obviously you do it for yourself and you've taught, but you have worked with designers as well, and you work with their quilts. How do you work with a designer in that way? Someone comes to you with a quilt, where does it start? Do you talk about colors or themes or feelings?
Well, first off, we'll talk about no matter who I'm quilting for, if it's for myself or for a friend or for a designer or a fabric company, the whole first question is, what are you going to use the quilt for, right? What are you going to use it for? Does it just need some light quilting? It's going to be a baby cuddly. If it's going to be a baby cuddly, you're only going to just want to put some light quilting on it, and you're not going to worry about fancy designs or putting a lot of thread into it, or time even, and with that in mind. So the first thing is, what is it going to be used for? And a lot of times the quilting that I do is for demonstration. It's for to be hung as a sample. So you want it to look like the very best that you can. All right. So if that's the case, you're trying to really show off someone's fabric line or their pattern, then you're going to dive into, okay, how much quilting do you really want on it? A lot of times there's a big question is, the more quilting you get, the more expensive it is, right? If I'm just going to do a little stipple, which those of you that know me know that I don't stipple, but if I'm just going to do some really quick and easy design, it's going to be a lot cheaper than me pouring my heart into every block or trying to find some beautiful custom quilting to put around every block. So the money is also a consideration, right? We talk a lot about batting, because the batting that you put into your quilt will help either accentuate the quilting, or it can kind of knock down the quilting a little bit. So if you want the quilting not to show much, you probably would use like a cotton batting. It's very thin and very flat. Or if you wanted a little bit more poof, you may do a cotton polyester blend. But if you want like the ideal, beautiful poof, you're going to want to go with wool, because wool has this amazing loft to it when you're done quilting. So these are the things we talk about. How much quilting? What are you going to use it for? How do you want the quilting to show? What do you want to show off with your quilt? Whether it's a panel or an actual pieced quilt or an applique quilt. I don't do a lot of quilting for hire because I'm so slow. Just ask a couple ladies out there that are waiting right now for me to finish their quilt.
Yeah, I know. Trudy's like that. Trudy's always like, I've got a mountain of quilts.
Yes. It's a great. It's a great experience to be able to quilt a quilt that's not yours, though. And it's also a little nerve-wracking at times, right? Because it's not yours. And sometimes I'll say to beginner quilters, you never want to choose the quilt to get started on that is really important to you, right? You don't want to take this quilt that you just spent 2 years preparing, piecing, appliquing, whatever you did, and then use that as your first quilt to quilt your own quilt. You never want to put that pressure on yourself. You want to do fun things. You want to do panels. You want to do baby quilts. You want to do placemats. You want to do simple things. So I digress from your question, but I hope that gave you a little insight into kind of the thought process.
Yeah, and one thing I've never thought about actually is the budget, like you say, because you have to work out, well, how much quilting do you want? Because this is all in the budget. So that's really important. It was interesting you were saying there about working on someone else's quilt. Trudy was working with Nicholas, and it was the sort of tree front, the log front for the front of the book that is, and there was a problem with it not laying flat, and he couldn't get it to work. And so he rang her, and she had this quilt in front of him. And he rang her and said, just cut it. And she was like, what? And he was like, just cut it. And she said, I can't do it. Cut it. And then put this. And so she did. She had to cut. She said it was the most terrifying moment of her life, cutting someone else's, quilt, Nicholas Ball's quilt. But, that's how the two designers work together. Now, another thing that's really interesting as well is that Trudy is a long armer. And so she uses the long arm machine, which I'm dying to have a go on, actually. If I'd got to the Festival of Quilts, I think I don't know if you can do it now in these times.
Yeah. Oh, I hope you can.
But I would love to have a go. But you actually don't use so much a long arm machine, do you? You do it on a regular sewing machine.
Yeah, I learned on a regular sewing machine. I never had space for a long arm, and I learned just at home. I first started out on my little Bernina, and then I upgraded to a Janome that has a wider throat space. And I even quilt on my little Singer Featherweight that only has like a 5-inch throat space. But what I found for me at the time, and my situation in life at the time, was I was bopping between home and the lake, and there's no way I could have a long arm in either location and do it justice. So I went with my domestic, and I fell in love with it. I don't have any stitch regulator on any of those machines. And I just fell in love with it. I learned on panels, though. It really helped me hone my skills. I did a lot of the World of Susie B is a fabric line. They have so many beautiful little children's prints and panels. So I learned on them. I did growth charts, and I did play mats, and I did pillows, and I did all these little things that the children aren't going to care if my circle is round or not round, right? And or if I mess up and I have a stitch here that's skipped here or there, that doesn't matter to them. But I fell completely in love with it. It's something so freeing about just having this palette in front of you. I'm not an artist. I never studied art. It was just very freeing. And I think, it was because I had that business analyst, programmer, IT background all day long, and I just wanted to do something fun, and what I thought was fun, and I really fell in love with it. So my home machine is my baby. I do now own a long arm, and I have for a few years, and I've done a few quilts on the long arm that are so fun. But I think in the end, the time I've invested is on my domestic machine or any of my domestic machines. And so that's really where I feel most comfortable, believe it or not. People say, you got to be crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I am crazy sometimes, but this makes sense to me. I love sitting at my machine, being able to see my whole quilt at one time, where on a long arm, you can only see what's unrolled, right? You can only see, depending on the depth of your long arm, you may be able to see 12 inches or 18 inches or 20 inches or 22, and that's all you can see. So when you finish that border at the top on your long arm and you roll it up, and then you get to the bottom border and you go, how did I do that transition from here? Then you have to unroll things. You have to think these things through. You don't have to do that on a domestic, right? It's all laying right in front of you. So that's kind of fun. It's great to be able to have both to choose from. So if I have a large quilt, I can still put it on the long arm. It might be there for a few months, but it's still there. So I did a great quilt for Aurifil recently on the long arm, maybe about 6 or 8 months ago. It was their 2019 Designer of the Month quilt. And Pat Sloan used to run that program for Aurifil. She's since retired from that. But she would choose 12 designers, and each designer would make a block. And then Pat would do the setting diagram, and the blocks would all get put together, and someone would have to quilt them. So in 2019, I was one of the the monthly designers. So I did my own little block. And then when it came time to quilt the quilt, Pat and I talked it over and she asked me if I'd quilt it. So if anyone is interested, I should plug that in the comments. Maybe I can do that later after the YouTube is over. I quilted that designer of the month quilt from 2019, and I wrote about each block and everything I thought about each block, why I would choose one weight of thread over another, why would I choose a variegated thread over a solid thread. And it was really so much fun. Each designer had their own story for their block. And so I spun off of that story to try to decide how to quilt that particular block. It was a lot of fun, and it was on my long arm. So, it's quite a big quilt. So I didn't have to like manage it on my home machine or on my table or anything like that. So I had a ball doing it. And I love writing about the process too, and sharing the things that I've learned while I do it. It's a lot of fun.
Do you find yourself, because you mentioned threads there, Karen, do you find yourself drawn to a particular thread or colors? Do you go in one way?
That's a great question. The Aurifil thread that I use, Aurifil has 6 different weights of cotton thread, right? And they have their monofilament. And I think 6 is right of cotton. I might get smacked if I'm wrong, but that's all right. People will understand who I am. Oh, yeah, she has to look at the chart. So I find personally, so when I started quilting, like free motion quilting, actually when I started even piecing, I was using that, take my coupon and go to my local craft store and buy the most inexpensive thread I could get, right? And then my friend Wendy Shepard, who's also she's an amazing pattern designer, but she's also an amazing free motion quilter on her home machine. She started using Aurifil, and so I'm like, well, if Wendy's doing it, if it's good enough for Wendy, then I should probably be using it, right?
So how you came across Aurifil, just purely by
it was the weirdest thing, because I was learning. I was still such an infant in the industry and just in the techniques, but I admired everything that Wendy did. I stalked her, right? She was the person that I read her blog every time she posted. I checked her. And there was no Instagram yet. We weren't doing that yet, right? But I just followed every word she said, and she's like, I'm using this Aurifil 50 weight thread, and I'm like, well, what's that? Where do you get that? How come I can't find that at Joann's or my local crafts? So I went out and found some at my local, actually one of my local shops in Ithaca, New York had some. And so I bought this 50 weight thread. And I was like, oh my gosh, it quilts like butter. It really, really did. But the part that confused me about it was that I had been using another brand's 50 weight thread, 50, for several years now. And not the generic one at the big stores. But another good name brand. In the 50 weight Aurifil was a little different, and then the 50 weight of this other brand, and I could not figure out why one was thicker than the other one. And then after years, I think it took me years to figure this out. The 50 weight Aurifil thread has only got 2 strands that are twisted together, right? 2 plies. The other brand I was using had 3 strands twisted together. And because the weight of the thread is measured by the single strand, the other brand had, half again as much thread as the Aurifil. So when you pick up a spool of Aurifil 50 weight and you compare it to any other 50 weight, chances are it's going to be thinner because it's only 2 ply. But that makes your seams press flat, right? It allows your less bulk in your seam. If you're free motion quilting, that 50 weight thread will almost disappear into the background. It's so fine. It's great for your bobbin because you can wind so much on a bobbin. And our big nemesis is always, we don't want to have to put a bobbin in again. My bobbin ran out. So you can put a lot of yards of 50 weight 2 ply thread on your bobbin. So I use it in my bobbin for almost everything. But yeah, that's how I got started. And then something happened. I don't even know what happened. And I started using the 28 weight Aurifil, which is now the lower the number, the thicker the thread. So I started using this one that's half again as thick as the 50 weight. And I fell completely in love with it because maybe I don't know what the word is for it, but I love seeing my stitches. I love seeing the quilting pattern, and I love to see it play out. So this 28 weight thread kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. I have a little thing here. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. Here's just a little heart that I had done. And I know the machine might not focus on it, but that's 28 weight thread. It's really, really heavy. Let me show you that. This is one of the thinnest weight threads that Aurifil does. This is 80 in the mint green and 28 in the yellow. And you can see what a huge difference there is in the thickness. So all of a sudden for me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of fun. I want to play with that one and that one and that one and that one. And that's exactly what I did. 28 weight then is kind of a, it's not for piecing. It's great for quilting, but it stands out. It gives your quilting some oomph, it kind of lifts it up off the fabric and just makes it so beautiful. And this color, oh my gosh, 2130 butter is my favorite color of Aurifil thread, especially in the 28 weight. It just is so gentle, but yet it's so the sheen is beautiful. I just love it.
It's really interesting. I've just learned something new. This is why these chats are so good, because I've just learned something there about Aurifil. In that there are so many brands in the world that people buy into because of the name. So you just go, oh well, it's going to be good. I'm gonna use, this is not sewing related, but I'm going to use something as an example.
Sure.
Many years ago, my mom used to work in a factory, and she used to be on the cake thing, like a conveyor belt cake thing, whatever, before she started sewing. Okay. And I remember, this is when I was a baby, and it was a night job that she could do, and then look after me in the daytime and stuff. And I remember she always told me that there were these cakes that were coming through. And this cake went into this box, and this cake went into this box. And it was exactly the same cake. But this box was for this shop, which was going to charge at least £2 or £3 more for the cake than this one. Now, is that a myth? Is it an urban myth, or is it my mom's true story? I don't know. No one sue me. But this is what she said. And there are so many things in the world where that does happen, that is it, if it's not the same, is it any really different? It's in prettier packaging with a big brand name. Is it better than a regular cotton? But you just explained there why it is, because of those amounts of single threads. And that, what you were just talking about there, that does make a difference, as you were saying about seams laying flatter. And that, and a lot of people might not realize this. And so they use the kind of lower end threads, don't get great results, and then think it's them. They think it's my sewing that's not good enough, but it's the thread. So it really is important to use that thread.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider, I think sometimes when we have to pay more for a single spool of thread or for any product, we always think I'm getting taken. I'm not getting my money's worth. But if you actually look yard for yard at how many yards are on a spool of Aurifil, a large spool of Aurifil thread compared to any other of the threads that you're buying, you're getting much more thread because it is only 2-ply, right? So if you take, you're getting half again as much basically on this than you get on any of the 3-ply threads. So it's so much worth it. The other thing I love about Aurifil, I've gotten to know the family. I've gotten to know the owners, Elena and Alex, and it's a family-run business, and they oversee every aspect of the business. And I love this. They don't farm something out to get done and then bring it back in and then sell it. They're making sure that every step of the 15-step process that they go through, as the master educator, I can tell you these things. There's a 15-step process, right? And every step is overseen by that family or someone that family hires to oversee it. So, and it's all happening in Italy, which I also want to, Rachel and I were talking about where I haven't been. The UK, I haven't been, and I haven't been to Italy. So, but it's the quality is just unmatched. It's a great thread. And if you haven't tried it yet, I highly encourage you, get to your local shop or get to your local stockist, get a spool of this orange spool. This is the 50 weight, 50. You're going to want a piece with it. You're going to want to do your needle turn applique with it, maybe your English paper piecing, and then you're going to try your free motion quilting with it as well. It's so fine. It's really lovely to work with. But then you're going to get addicted to the 28 weight like I did, and you're going to want that 80 weight for some specialty things. And there's just so much.
Yeah. Let's talk about actually the Aurifil collections, because I do think it is interesting that Aurifil do work with a lot of designers. In our stable, I know that Nicholas Ball has created a collection. Sarah Ashford, I think, has, and Chris English.
Joe Avery. Joe Avery.
I think Janet Clare.
And Jenny Smith. And yep. There's
so
a
many.
Yes.
I know when I was talking to Chris English and I asked him about the collection and how it came about and how it works, and he said that, you know, Chris is very inspired by street art, and you know, he uses sustainable fabrics and then makes his amazing crumb blocks. So his collection is there's lots of kind of, I'd call them zippy color, you know, kind of like bright colors, but also different weights as well, because that's very eclectic and that's how he kind of works. So how does the process work when a designer starts working with Aurifil? Is it very much that, like, tell us about yourself and what inspires you?
Yeah, and from my point of view, I had been working with Aurifil thread, just doing all my sewing and quilting and creating with it for a few years. I've been blogging about it. I have a blog that is still out there. I don't write to it as much as I used to with all these other platforms now that we can benefit from. But I would blog about my projects, my new projects, and I would try to teach and educate while I blogged, because when I started quilting, that's how I learned. I learned from other bloggers, because there were none of these other avenues were there. And I didn't travel to my local shop, which was 30 minutes away all the time, because I was working full time, right? I had kids, grandkids, and so there was no time for it. So I learned online on blogs. So I would try to give back by blogging. And I just started this great relationship with the folks from Aurifil. And one thing kind of snowballed, and it was a very organic. I started using their thread and talking about their thread a lot. I would go to Quilt Market. I was going to Quilt Market with World of Susie B, with the fabric company, and I would talk about their fabrics and how to quilt them and what to do with them. And then I started kind of doing the same a little bit with Aurifil, kind of hanging in the booth and just hanging out with them. But they offered to me basically an opportunity to make my own collection. We had been working together for some years. So it was this, like, again, an organic process. There was nothing cast in stone. Aurifil works with some of the top designers, pattern designers, and fabric designers in the industry. And I think when other designers, what I've basically just watched over the years is that most designers choose those colors, right, and those weights that they're using all the time. A lot of designers have fabric lines, which I don't, right? But a lot of designers have fabric lines, so they choose the colors that's going to work with their fabric line. If you're not at market and you have to choose your colors, Aurifil has this amazing color card, right? So it's kind of like little tool that you want to just take home and pet. This is actually real thread on here, right? Nice. So designers will kind of get the color card out, unless they're at market, and then there's all the spools are already there. It's so beautiful, right? It's like, oh my gosh, look at 270 colors to choose from for most of their weights. So they'll just look at the color card and they'll choose the colors that suit their fabric line. And this is just in my experience of what I've watched over the years. And then they'll choose the weights again that work for them. So someone like Tula Pink, she loves the 50 weight because she does a lot of piecing, right? She does beautiful, beautiful work. Now, Jo Avery, she's amazing at handwork. She loves to do the handwork, like some of what Nicholas does and the others. So she loves the heavier weight threads, like the 12 weight threads. Jo's got a couple collections in that. And then every designer is different. My friend Wendy Shepherd has a couple of different collections, and one of her last collections, she did 80 weight, which was it's the finest weight of thread that Aurifil makes. And she was free motion quilting with it, but you can do such fine detail with that 80 weight. So I think what most designers do is they're drawn to a certain color way or colorways, and then they already know their favorite weights, right? And when I did the subtle sampler, you asked about mine, and when I did the subtle sampler, my whole thing was about education again and getting people to try the different weights. So I went subtle because I thought that it would be neutral enough to go across a lot of different colorways and a lot of different styles. And then I loaded it up with all the different weights of thread that were available at the time. So, and I'm not even going to show you the front, because when you look at Aurifil spools, you can tell just by the color of the spool what weight it is, right?
Oh, okay.
So the gray spool here, these are gray. I know it might be hard to see, but these are the gray ends here. That's the 28 weight. That's one of my favorite weights, right? And then you have red down here. Those are 12 weight. So I don't even have to open up my cases to see what I have inside. I know I have 250s in here because it's orange, 340s because they're green. I have the 12 weights, and I have some of the monofilament in smoke and in gray. So my subtle sampler collection, my point was, I want you to try all these different weights. I want you to see how well your machine loves it. I want you to see how putting something heavier in your machine for your quilting can make a certain part of your quilt pop. It can really make it pop. And then I also want you to see that you can have the 12 weight on a spool, so I can run it through my machine, or I can do hand applique with it. I can do both because it's on a spool. And I felt like, oh, this is a win-win for me. It justified me buying all the 12 weights I wanted, because now I can do wool applique on my machine or by hand. And it was just so, that's why I put this little sampler together. And there's only one little pop of color in here. I just have this little one pop of color. Woo, there we are.
I love that pink. It's my favorite color.
Yeah. And let me just show you one little thing I made with the subtle sampler, because this was a free tutorial that after the subtle sampler came out, I put together this little subtle tree. It's just a tiny little guy. But what I wanted to encourage people to do was to try to thread paint with all the different weights. Because if you can put a weight of thread in your machine, get the right size needle. You've got to change your needle size based on thread weight, because you can't take a really heavyweight thread like a 12 weight thread and put it into a size 75 or 80 or 90 needle. The eye of the needle is not large enough, and it will shred your thread. So kind of talking people through using different weights and having them try it and letting the thread break if that's what's going to happen, because I think the mistakes that we make like that help us learn. So I put this little thing together. I also did some little tiny hand knots in here, some free motion quilting in the background with the 40 weight, but it's so much fun. I mean, what I've found is that most beginners start out with 50 weight, and then comes a time when they go, I wonder what I can do with that 40 weight. I wonder what I can do with that 12 weight. And it just progresses. And it's something that I love to say when I'm teaching is that, don't compare yourself to somebody else who's more advanced or been doing it longer than you, because I'm where I'm at right now. I'm going to change tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's what you do too, right? That's what your followers, your readers, do. Everybody changes. So you all progress with time. I would have never thought about using another weight when I first started out. Just it didn't click yet. But now it's like all the weights, right? Give me. It's so much fun.
Well, I mean, it's, we did a class actually with Lucy Brennan, and she came to me and she said, could I, because we ask our tutors what they'd like to teach, and we also listen to what people want as well. And thank you, by the way, for your comments. I will go through your comments in a second. But we asked people what they want to teach. And Lucy said, can I teach a class about thread? Now, me being the non-quilter, I just thought, okay, we've got to fill 3 hours, Lucy. And she was like, I could fill 12 hours. And I was like, okay. So sat there with this class about thread. And it is one of our most popular, because people can go to our website, CraftyMonkies.com, and they can download the classes that are recorded. And you just literally get a link to a private area on YouTube, and then you watch the whole class. It is one of our most popular classes that people choose to rent.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
And when I edit the classes, sometimes a 3-hour class becomes a 2-hour, 15-minute recording in the shop with their lower price than the classes. Because I cut out the chat and I cut out the breaks and things. That was nearly 3 hours, I think, of talking from Lucy. It was amazing. And she goes through all the different weights and what you can do, etc. And I had no idea as well. But I think also want to pick up on something you said there as well, Karen, about not comparing yourself to other people, and to not try, you know, it's the saying, isn't it, in life, don't run before you can walk. And it's like anything, everybody starts and just progresses. Like our lovely Tom Daly just won the gold, 13 years plus all the training, so probably
Yeah.
20 years, and he's only about 27, 20 years or something of training. He didn't just go straight up to that platform and jump off. I mean,
Right.
I couldn't even jump off that thing, never mind head first. But, you know, it is about taking your time. So where would you advise people, Karen, to, well, first of all, where can they, I mean, obviously they can come to our website, they can rent a video on threads, but where are there other places that people could go to learn about threads? And where would you advise, if someone is just starting their quilting journey, where do they start with threads? What do they start with?
Well, I think most people kick off with that 50 weight thread. And I think a lot of times today, I see a combination as far as learning about things, is there are a lot of quilters that are involved in guilds. Across the United States, it's amazing how many wonderful guilds that we have. So if you aren't affiliated or associated with a guild in your area, do Google it, look it up, talk to your local quilt shop, find out if there's a guild nearby that you can join, because the guilds have a tremendous amount of knowledge and information available. And although it might take away from us that are out here teaching on online, it's a great community, right? And that's what it's all about. It's about the community. It's about getting to know somebody so well that you can just call them up and say, I'm stuck. Can you help me, right? So go to your local guild, go to your local shop. And then also the online resources are just amazing right now. Bloggers, Zoomers, just pre-recorded classes like you mentioned, Rachel. It's just a tremendous amount of information there. What Aurifil has done in the last few years, which I mentioned when we first started, is they started a program called Aurifilosophy, and I'm one of their Aurifilosophers, but I also run the program with, there's 34 of us Aurifilosophers across the globe, of which Nicholas is one, and Joe Avery is one in the UK, and Jenny Smith is one. And then we have a lot in the United States, Australia, Canada, we're all over the place. But what they did was they created Aurifilosophy. It's a presentation, a structured presentation that has like 70 slides that are really done very well, but it covers the history, it covers the basics of cotton, it covers plies and why you have different ply threads, and it covers how to position your spools, how to change your tension. It shows you how many different techniques you can do with each weight of thread. So Aurifilosophy is provided by a certified Aurifilosopher. Some do it via Zoom, some do it still in person at shops or at guilds, or in a big setting like Festival of Quilts or Quilt Festival here in the United States. And be prepared to engage for about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. And it's so easy to talk about all those weights. I'd love to show you a couple of slides from that. Can I show you?
Please.
A couple of slides.
We must say on YouTube, this is an experiment, because we haven't done a screen sharing thing. So we're hoping that YouTube will pick up what Zoom are doing. We're hoping they're going to be friends. So I know on Zoom, I will see what you're doing, Karen. Let's hope that people on YouTube see. But yeah, I think you can share your screen.
I'm going to skip into a couple slides into the program, but this is one of my favorite slides. I'm going to delay a little. Well, I know that you guys don't see it right yet, but you're not hearing me right yet either. So one of my favorite slides is why we love Aurifil. And I always change it to say why I love Aurifil, because I think one of the great things about the Aurifilosophy program is that the folks that are certified to talk about it are makers. They're makers and creators, and they're already in love with Aurifil thread, or else they wouldn't be talking about it at all. So I'm not here to sell you on anything. I'm here to tell you why I'm sold on this thread and why I think you really should try it. But so this is one of my favorite slides. It's a natural fiber. It's strong. It's got minimal lint. This is something that with Aurifil, people tend to kind of overlook that, but everyone's big concern when using cotton thread is how much lint buildup ends up in their machine. You know, they don't want to have to stop and clean their machine or their bobbin all the time. So the Aurifil thread does a couple of things. Like one thing that most thread companies do is called mercerization. It's where the thread is basically dumped into not exactly, a vat of caustic soda. And that soda actually changes the organic composition of the cotton. It opens it up, allows it to accept the dye. It starts that strengthening process, and it starts also that sheen coming into play. So the mercerization and another step that they call singeing, where they literally pass the thread by a naked flame. The thread is passed by a naked flame, and all those little lint pieces that we don't want to see in our machine are singed off as the thread is going by during this process. It's a great process that, not every company does, and it minimizes the lint. One more thing to minimize the lint that Aurifil does that I absolutely love, and that's a process that where as they're winding the thread on to the finished spool, the spool that you and I can buy in the store or from your stockist, they pass it through a bath of paraffin oil. I really think that paraffin oil is what makes that thread just glide right through your machine. It does amazing things to minimize the length, add that sheen once more, and then also it just glides right through your machine. Let me show you another slide here that I think is whoops, I stopped my share, but that's all right. Let me scroll forward a little bit and show you another slide that's kind of fun. It's amazing to me, actually, because when I think most of us find that we never know what color of thread to choose. And one of the things with Aurifil thread is they have like 270 colors of most of their weights of thread. So this chart shows you all the different weights they have, and then the different colors that are available. And of those colors, how many are variegated. So Aurifil has this tremendous amount of options when it comes to choosing color. Let me just skip ahead another couple slides here, because this is something that I think from a thread education standpoint that is important when we're having trouble. Maybe we're having thread shredding or thread breakage when we're using a spool of Aurifil or any cross-wound spool of thread. This diagram shows you what the cross-wound spools look like. They look like there's an X on them. They're diagonal on your actual spool. And when you're looking at a spool like that, if you're having trouble with it mounted on however it's mounted on your machine, if it's breaking or shredding, think about the size needle that you're using, first of all, and make sure that it's good for the weight thread you're using, but also that those cross-wound spools love to be drawn off the top of the spool. That means if the spool is vertical, you want to draw it straight up to a guide, which then that guide ties down into your machine. Or if you mount it horizontally on your machine, you want to pull it again off the top. So think about that only if you're having troubles. If you've been using it all along and it's working great, don't worry about it. But if you have the straight wound spools, some of the older spools of thread like Coates and Clark's and Star threads, and some of those like a monofilament might be straight wound. Those spools are expected to just get the threads pulled right off the side. So the spool is actually spinning on your machine. Now, sometimes that drives me a little bit batty because I'm not used to the spool spinning, but on my featherweight, that's how it is, unless I have some way to adapt a different thread pull to it. So that's kind of fun to share. This weight and color matter. I want to skip to the chase here, but here's what I mentioned about how the thread spool color indicates what weight it is. This is the color. This is the decoder right here, the decoder screen. And then here's just a bit of an image of how the heavyweight threads look when they're stitched out. Compared to the fine weight threads. The 12 weight, remember, the lower the number, the heavier the weight, the higher the number, the thinner, finer the weight. So the 80 weight is on the right-hand side, the 12 is in. Just look at the difference, look at the variety that you can get. And then one more tip I want to share, I'm going to skip past this one. This tip right here, which not everybody is aware of, this is a large spool of Aurifil thread, and a lot of people don't realize that the bottom flange comes off of that large spool of thread, and that's where you're always going to find the beginning of your thread. Let me just show you with a spool here, although I don't have any brand new spools sitting next to me. When you just twist the bottom flange here, it pops right off, and on a new spool of thread, that's always where your thread is going to be tucked under. Sometimes Aurifil gets a complaint that people had to cut into their spool to find the beginning, and they had to do all these crazy things. It's like, no, don't do it, right? Just take that flange off. And then when you're done, just kind of tuck that right back under there, put the flange back on. Another tip I love to share with folks, sometimes they go, I sew along and it goes for a little while and then all of a sudden it breaks. And I don't know why. Can you help me? It's I don't think it's my machine because it doesn't happen on this other spool. So what I found over the years is that if this flange gets put on there too tightly, it will actually kind of crimp that bottom layer of threads, and they won't unwind very easily, which could cause them to break. So if you're having kind of that intermittent break problem, just untwist this just a tiny little bit so that that flange isn't too tight on the bottom of your spool. It will really, really make a difference with your thread if you're having that breakage problem. So to wrap that Aurifilosophy discussion up, because I know we have been chatting along for a long time, reach out. Actually, Rachel's been considering hosting an Aurifilosophy paid program on the channel, and we'd love to work with her in doing that. So if anyone is interested in that, feel free to drop that in the comments. Your local guilds, your local shops, they can all also have Aurifilosophy presented by one of our certified educators at their fingertips. So you can see that most Aurifilosophers love to talk about thread. They love to show you.
There's a lot to talk about, isn't there? But that's some great
tips. So yeah.
Tips in there, though, Karen. I just want to ask you actually about the filament threads. We're going to talk about that compared to cotton threads. So what's the difference between filament and cotton? And then also thinking about the bobbin, if you use filament in your needle and you're sewing with it, do you have to use the filament in the bobbin as well, or would you use a cotton? And what would you do?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Aurifil monofilament. A monofilament means it's just a single strand, right? It's just a mono, so it's just one strand in one color. And the Aurifil monofilament is a little different than some of the other brands. It's made from nylon and not polyester. If you think about a monofilament thread, this is one of the ways in which it's delivered. This is a large cone of smoke-colored monofilament. And this, you can't even see the strand that's coming off of this. It's so tiny. It's almost like 100-weight thread, very, very fine. Yeah. There are certain uses for monofilament. Some people are really afraid of it because it's like fishing line. It stretches, right? Yeah. It's not like cotton. If you take any spool of cotton thread, I don't care how many plies it is or what brand it is, if you take a single strand and you put it in your hands and you snap it, you can snap it with your hands. If you just pull hard enough, it's going to snap because the strength is not in just this one little spot of the thread. It's as you stitch it in multiple stitches is what makes the strength of the thread. But the monofilament won't do that, right? If you pull on this monofilament, I mean, I could, of course, break it because I'm strong, right? But if your machine is pulling on it, it's just going to keep stretching and stretching and stretching. So what you have to be careful with it is that if you're using it only on the top of your machine, you're going to want to reduce your top tension. You don't have to worry too much about your needle selection because it's so fine. You can use a very small needle, like a size 70. You could use an 80 or a 90 as well. I often use it with a 90 in my machine. So the eye of the needle, most needles, is plenty big enough for this 100-weight like thread. So it will stretch. So you need to reduce your top tension. The tension thing is like a tug of war, right? Between your top and your bobbin. And if your top thread is going to stretch, if it's pulled too much, then you want to kind of decrease that tension. You don't want to have a lot of tension on it. And the thought about the bobbin though, Rachel, is that it's probably not recommended to use monofilament in your bobbin because if you think about winding a bobbin and how quickly we wind a bobbin, we go really fast, right? Let's get this over with. Let's wind this bobbin. But what happens if you wind a bobbin of monofilament really fast is chances are it's going to stretch. Yeah. So that means when it's applied through the needle in your stitches, they're going to want to come unstretched or draw in, right, and buckle a little bit when you're done. So I wouldn't recommend using monofilament in top and bobbin. I would say just use it on the top. Use that beautiful Aurifil 50-weight thread, the orange spool. in your bobbin, because you can get a lot of that on your bobbin. Decrease your top tension. Let me see if I have a chart here real quick that summarizes that. Yeah, here's one right here. Let me show you this. If I can. Got time for that?
Yes.
So this is just one of this is one of the slides that's in the Aurifilosophy program. And for every different week, we show you all these amazing samples. There's of all the different Aurifilosophers of how they've applied the thread by machine, by hand, and otherwise. So this is a quilt that I did. You can see when using the monofilament, the thread itself takes on the color of the background fabric. Do you see that?
Yeah.
You can't really see a color. All you're seeing is your fabric. But one thing to notice is that you want to increase your stitch length, because teeny tiny stitches of monofilament are doing no one any good. You want to kind of take a nice big jump every time you're stitching. It'll allow the thread to just lay flat on top of your fabric. And then other thing is that you can lower the top tension. So lower the top tension, increase your stitch length. If you're on a long arm, a small needle is fine, a 3.5 or even a 3.0 long arm size. And actually a size 80 needle is really plenty big enough on a domestic machine. But put a fine weight thread in your bobbin and just have fun with it. There's so many things you can do. I don't know what else I have here. Oh, that's a different slide. Oh, here's another little quilt that I did with monofilament. And one of the fun things I did on this particular quilt that was made by my sister is I used the monofilament to stitch all around that little applique. Do you see the applique? There were so many different color changes and so much applique that wasn't stitched down. It was just fused down, that the monofilament worked perfectly to kind of just stitch down all the edges of those applique. It blends in. It's not expensive to use. You just have to get the hang of it. Always, always, always practice on something, just a little sample somewhere, because you'll be so happy once you give it a try. It's great thread.
That's incredible, actually. Yeah, that quilt was amazing, Karen. That quilt was amazing. But also as well, that's really interesting, because when we were doing the chat with Nicholas and Trudy, a lot of people were talking about, well, what if I don't want to use a color on the background? So that's a great way to go, by using that, because as you say, it sort of blends into the background, but it gives that lovely poofy finish as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Wow. Do you know, I would love to do an Aurifil presentation, because I do think people might just think, why do I want to listen about but it's not, okay, yes, it is about Aurifil and how fantastic they are, but also it is about thread and how you use it. And you've given so many top tips there, just about threads in general, I think, and working with threads, which is really fascinating. So it would be great to do a chat. Let me just see, we've had a couple of comments there from people. And Steiner is in Germany. Hello, my darling. She's a lovely lady. She's one of our regulars. She's also said the quilt in the back with the bubbles is so inspiring to play with thread colors. Yeah, so she's looking at your quilt background.
And this is the doodle quilt. This was made with all Aurifil 28 weight thread. So you can see that it's quilted over and over and over in a lot of cases. So much fun to do. 28 weight on top. Let me show you another one that was kind of the precursor to it. Maybe you can see it a little bit better. How it looks like it's embroidery, but it's just free motion quilting. This is all 28 weight thread, just stitched over and over and over. But this doodle quilt was so much fun. There's a lot of information on my Instagram. Just use the hashtag a quilter's doodle quilt. And you'll see everything about it.
But also your Instagram as well, Karen, is Redbird Quilt Co. Is that
yes,
right?
That's right. Redbird Quilt Co. at Redbird Quilt Co. And and I actually did a video with Aurifil at Quilt Market a few years ago. And I think that's, if you go to my link tree in my bio of Instagram, you'll find a link in there that takes you to my tutorials. And then my tutorial will link you over to the Facebook Live I did with Aurifil about this particular quilt a few years ago when I made it. I love it. Thank you. I love the doodle quilt. So one of my fun classes that I teach too.
Well, Karen has said, I would also love to quilt like Wendy Shepherd. I am more closely following Karen's style though. And she said, how do you secure the ends of your monofil when quilting?
So thank you for the question. That's a great question. And I hope I'll have to have Wendy watch this so she knows how much people love her. I am generally not quilting for show. If you were quilting for show, you would generally leave several inches of thread at the end of your stitching, tie a knot in them, and then use your like a self-threading needle to bury those threads. When I'm stitching with any other weight, monofilament, 12 weight, any other weight thread, generally what I do is I stitch eensy beensy tiny stitches right at the very end of my free motion quilting. So I might take what I call lock stitching, 5 or 6 or 7 small stitches, not one, not where we're using the button on our machine to stitch in place, because that will put every stitch on top of the last one. You want to take tiny little stitches, one right next to another, just barely moving your fabric so that you can lock all those stitches nice and tight together. And then I use my scissors. I love my Elan serrated edge scissors, and I have my scissor sitter on, and I just reach down and I snip both the top and the bobbin flush. So tiny stitches right as you finish up that part of quilting, and then trim your threads flush. But let me give you another little tip that I give in my classes. Especially this is true on the doodle quilt. When I was doing the doodle quilt and I had the same color thread in one section that I knew I needed to use just a few inches away, what I would do is something I call lock and jump. So I would lock my stitches over here on this pretty fuchsia color. I'd lock my stitches, taking 5 or 6 or 7 tiny little stitches, one right next to the other. Then I'd lift up my needle. My needle's down in my fabric. I'd pull my needle up, pull my foot up, and then I would just slide the quilt over to my next nearest place where I wanted to begin. And then I would take my lock stitches again, right? I didn't cut anything. I just slid over to my new section, put my needle down, put my foot down, take my 5 or 6 or 7 tiny little stitches, one right next to the other, locking things in place. And then I'd start quilting with that color, with that new color. And when I was all done, then I would go back and trim my threads where I drug from point A to point B. What that does is it reduces the amount of time for you to start back up again. And it also minimizes the mistakes or errors that can happen when you cut your thread and you need to bring your bobbin back to the top and things like that. So it kind of keeps you in the groove, keeps you moving along. It's so much fun. So it's a lock and jump. Don't forget about that. But lock those stitches in tiny little stitches when you're done stitching. That comes into play really well with 12 weight too, because it's so heavy. You want to get tiny and more small as you go along to kind of lock them before you trim. That was a long answer to a short question.
Well, no, but it was good. It was good. That's what you do. You ask your questions. Yeah. Okay, that was the end of the questions. Anybody who's watching, by the way, this is what all the YouTubers say. They say, give us a like. Give us a like in here, guys. So please do like. Just hit the subscribe to Crafty Monkeys. Give us a like, and then subscribe, and then you get notified every time we go live. Well, Karen, it's been absolutely fantastic, and I would love to have you teach for Crafty Monkeys. I know you and I are in discussiones, as they say, but it would be amazing to have you come and teach some of your techniques with us here. So watch this space. We will hopefully get you here one day. I know that you are incredibly busy, but you know, we've got time. We've got time. I'm talking to new tutors.
That would be awesome. I want to point out.
Yeah,
can I point out to those that are watching that Rachel does this amazing thing where when she has a teacher teaching, she is moderating. So she's handling the camera angles, you know, which camera you're looking at. If there's a question that the teacher missed, she's going to say, oh, Mrs. Teacher or Mr. Teacher, no, could you go back and come, you know, so it's great to have a moderator. A lot of times in our Zooms, it's just the educator and the students, right? And there's no one in between. But the role that you play, Rachel, and I think that you're amazing at, is the moderation and kind of tuning into what people need, and maybe even if the instructor, the educator kind of missed it. So we appreciate that you made the platform and that you're paying special attention that way and doing all that fun stuff. So thank you for that. I'd love to work something out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key. Is I always want everybody, I always say at the beginning of every class, you know, make sure you ask your questions, because I want everybody to walk away having had the best experience ever. There's nothing worse. It's like when you're in a maths class at school and you didn't dare ask the question because everybody would think you were stupid. And then you would walk out the lesson thinking, I don't know what I'm doing now. So I always say, don't do that in our things. You must always ask the question. And yeah, you're right. And I always joke, I always call the person in the class Betty. Now, we've probably had some Bettys. But I always use Betty as an example. And I say that I'm always watching out for Betty. And if Betty is in the corner, because I'm always watching, the teacher is teaching, I'm watching. And if I see Betty is looking a little bit confused, I will say, hey, Betty, are you okay? Or I'll direct message her in the chat and say, Betty, do you want to ask a question? And we just make sure that everybody's happy. And it's a really fun community. It's very much a community. And now a lot of people are coming back again and again and again and again. So they're getting to know other people. You get to know people across the world. You get to hear about the weather in Hawaii while you're in Glasgow. I mean, it is a really great platform. And I'm really grateful that people have tried the technology, because it's very easy. The whole Zoom thing, we send a link, people click on it, the window opens. It's as easy as that. And then I do all the work, I'm the teacher. You just sit there and watch. You can turn your camera off, you can turn your sound off, you can be in your pajamas at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to be involved in the class, but if you want to be involved, you absolutely can. So it's great fun. It's great fun. And I get to meet amazing inspirational people like you, Karen, who want to create joy and bring joy. And I get to meet all these amazing students who are so passionate. And it really is, I'm very, very fortunate. I'm very lucky to have this job.
It's a great online community. It really is.
Right. Now, Karen, before you go, I always ask my guests this question. I'm not sure if I told you I was going to ask you this question, but I always ask them every time, if you had a dinner party, which 3 guests would you invite? And I always say, forget about me. I'll be there anyway. I'll be hosting it. I'll be talking to Betty in the corner. So which 3 guests are you going to invite? Could be anybody, famous, non-famous, family, passed on, a dog. Well, I mean, anybody.
This is because I'm such an avid follower of yours. I've already heard this question asked to your previous interviewees. So I actually gave it some thought, and it's a hard question. You know what I mean? So, but only because there's so many amazing people to be with in our world today. But I did come up with 2 ladies that have passed that I would love to have back to a dinner party. And one is my mother. My mother was my hero, and without getting too sappy and starting to cry in your YouTube live, she's been gone a while now, and she was always my hero, though, and always the one that stood by me. So I would love to have her back at a dinner party. And one other lady that's passed that hasn't been gone all that long, and that maybe some of your viewers know, is Di Ford Hall. Di is an Australian creator, fabric designer, pattern designer, just one amazing person. And we lost her much too young in her life to cancer. And so I would love to sit with Di again for just one more time, because she was such an amazing person. She was one of those educators and fabric designers that you connected with, and she connected with you. You looked at this woman in the eye and you could see her. She wasn't putting on the facade. It was just who she was. So I miss Di terribly. I know everyone else that loved Di does as well. So I was thinking about it, that would be awesome. And then the other, maybe I just all connected with all these people in the past. I guess there might be some ghosts flying around here. But then I couldn't decide between someone like Carl Sagan or Albert Einstein. I would love to meet some of those people that kind of just, transformed how we thought about the world, about the physical world. And so I would love to meet one of those 2. I'd love to have them here and just say, wow, thank you, for everything that you did for us to learn who we are, where we're going in this world. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Anyhow, it's all fun people and people I love dearly.
Well, I mean, I'm very good at bringing people together and hosting. Sadly, I can't bring those people. But, if we get into hologram technology one day, maybe I could, we could get some holograms going. That would be amazing.
That would be great. Come on. Join us. We're here. We love you.
We're here. Oh, Karen, listen, it's been an absolute joy, we have been live. I can see it. It's on my phone. Last week, I pressed the right button. What I did was, if everybody's wondering what I did, nobody cares, but I didn't press the public button. So it was just me and Kim going live to ourselves. So I kept saying, we're live, but nobody's watching, because we were live.
But you can go watch that recording, right? That recording is out there. Yeah, go watch Kim's recording with Rachel from last week. It was a great event. I watched it myself.
And the Pat Sloan is up there.
Oh gosh,
yeah, terrific. interview. I think nearly 2,000 people have watched that interview now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But this has been lovely as well, Karen. So
thank you. It has been my pleasure.
So much. And as I say, hopefully we will get you on board as a teacher and hopefully get that Aurifil presentation. If anybody would like it, drop a comment below.
Please, that'd be awesome. That'd be fun.
Now you're going to stay with me. You're going to stay with me on the Zoom for a couple of seconds so I can say goodbye to you personally, but I'm going to end it on YouTube. I'm just checking if there's any more comments.
Yeah.
Yes, Steiner said, dear Rachel, could you please write Karen's links in the info box? Yes, I will. So when I've edited the video, I will absolutely go into the description box and I will put in Karen's website. I'll put in Karen's Instagram. Do you have Facebook as well, Karen?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So I'll put you on there as well. And Karen, if you want to email me any links, I will then put those in the description box. So
yes, also, and be sure to go out and thank Aurifil on any of those platforms as well, because they're the ones that got me here today. So thank you, Aurifil, for that as well. But yeah, absolutely love to have you guys stop by, say hi, give a follow, like.
Give it a follow and a like and a subscribe, whatever. Oh, that is a follow. Right. Okay. I am going to hit this button now. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you.
Karen. And we will see you. I don't know if I'm talking to anybody next Friday, but I think the following Friday, which is, let me just check my calendar. It is August the 13th. Yeah, August the 13th is me and the gorgeous Zach Foster.
Oh.
So that's going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about sustainability as well as lots of other things. So another guest from New York. So that is on the 13th of August. But I'm going to say goodbye to everybody on YouTube and to Karen. And thank you so much for joining us. So farewell.
Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining us. And
that's it. We have ended